Hello again, everybody. It's me, Mick. Today we are going to be making some mushroom risotto. We'll have a quick run through the ingredients. We have a small white onion, rapeseed oil, a little bit of truffle oil. I'll explain a little bit of that when we get to it. We have some white wine, butter, arborio rice, and porcini mushrooms. So I suppose it's a really cheap dinner to make. If you were to buy a kilogram of arborio rice, you'd probably pay about €3 for it. The porcini mushrooms are a little bit more expensive, but they go a long way. I need a lot of liquid for this recipe, so I have the kettle but just boiled. So I'm going to soak my mushrooms because they're dried and almost like cardboard. So we're going to soak them and rehydrate them and use the stock out of them to actually hydrate our rice. Into a jug. Add about 700 ml of water to them.
How much mushrooms have you got there, Mick?
I have about 30 grams, so that's one packet. In another jug then, I am going to pop in a stock cube. It can be chicken, it can be vegetable, it can be beef, whatever you have. I just wouldn't recommend using a fish one. Between 500 and 700 milliliters of water. Again. So then I'm going to set these aside for a few minutes and while we're here, I'm going to show you how to finely dice an onion. So I'm going to top and tail them. When it comes to the root, literally just take the colour off it. Don't take the actual white out, leave it in. Then we are going to split them down the middle, just to make it easier to peel. Then, to make a fine dice, what you want to do is you want to take the root out, cut diagonally down into it, and make sure it is all gone. Then we're going to hold on to it firmly and slice down this way, but don't quite cut the edges off. So you can see down, you sliced it lengthwise, and then you're going to go back, hold it good and tight with your fingers, like almost like a claw, so that when you put your knife against it, it's only ever going to hit your knuckle, and run it against your knuckle all the time. So leave the point of your blade on the board and down in like a sweeping motion. And go all the way back to your onion as far as where you have sliced into it. Okay, so I'm going to take this piece off for a minute. And then the little piece you have left, again, hold like a claw. We are going to light underneath our pot. We're going to leave it on about a medium heat, about halfway of whatever your settings go. And into the pot we're going to add, I'm using rapeseed oil, you can use olive oil, you can use vegetable oil. I suppose about 3 good nice glugs. Then some butter as well. And again, probably a little bit less butter than oil. And leave them there to get really, really hot. Once your butter and oil have come up and kind of the bubbling has kind of stopped, you'll be able to see all the little milk solids in there are gone quite nice and brown. It's not burnt, it's still like a nice caramel nutty brown, and it almost smells like a nutty kind of a smell from it. Turn the heat up, and we're going to throw in our rice first of all, our arborio rice, 250 grams of it. And then here it'll start to sizzle. I'm going to mix that and soak that all straight up. We're going to add our onion in on top of it.
delay. Get your Lewisburg Community TV merchandise today.
Giving it another mix here. What we're waiting for is the rice, kind of the edges of it to turn a little bit translucent. So you'll see some of them have started. As you see down here, the edges of them are just starting to turn translucent. That's what we're looking for. We are just waiting on our rice to turn a little bit translucent around the edges. That's what we're just giving it a mix and adding a lid to it. So you will see on this little grain here that the edges of it are almost see-through, almost like a frosted window. So that's what we're looking for, most of it to turn like that. You'll see here is a better example. Okay? Now that all of our rice has turned translucent, I'm going to add in a couple of glugs of white wine. This is one that we bought and it was a little bit drier than we had expected. I would normally say don't cook with a wine you wouldn't drink with, because if you don't like it to drink, you aren't going to like it to eat. But it is quite nice, just a little bit dry. So I'm going to pop it in. And I suppose just enough to cover the base of your pan. So I'm using quite a large pot, so that's why it looks like I have loads in there. I don't. You see it'll turn quite white straight away, and all the starch is going to leach out of that rice. So once that's cooked off, you can turn up the heat and cook it all off. You don't want to leave the actual liquid in there. You want to cook all the alcohol off, as the flavour is what you're waiting for. And then we're going to start adding stock, and that's where the fun starts. Now that our wine has cooked off, you'll see that all of the rice will kind of stick together. It's really starchy, and you'll see on the base of your pan it'll actually leave like a residue. So you don't want to cook it any further than that. You want to start adding in stock. So I'm going to start with my stock cube stock. I'm going to pop in half it. We're going to give it a good mix to make sure that there's no lumps or anything in here, and there's nothing left stuck to the sides of the pot or pan, whatever you're cooking in. A good mix, and then we're going to simmer it uncovered until all that water has either been boiled off or absorbed by the rice, and I'll check back with you when that happens. So you'll see now that most of our liquid has been absorbed. It's only just come to the boil now, so it hasn't been cooked off. So you'll see that all of the grains of rice are starting to swell, and we are going to add in the rest of our stock mixture. Give it a little swirl to make sure we get all of that stock cube in there, and throw it all in. And then we are also going to strain our mushroom. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to pop it through a strainer into the other jug. I'm not even going to wash the other jug, because it's all ending up on top of our risotto anyway. And we're going to reduce the heat down another little bit to about 1/4 of the way. So you'll see my flame here is quite small underneath, and just leave it ticking over. So what you will find is that risotto will stick quite easily. So you don't want to cook with a high heat. You want to leave it gently bubbling all the time. It's up to yourself if you want to leave it covered or uncovered. You'll see if it's drying up quite quickly. I would say cover it and just keep them back to it every 3 or 4 minutes to give it a stir. So again, our rice has absorbed most of that cooking liquid. So we're going to start adding in our mushroom stock. Just going to pop in again, maybe 1/4 of it at a time, and give it a stir. Don't worry if that water is even black, don't panic. It's all mushroom flavour that you want to add in. The reason I haven't actually added any salt is because stock cubes can be quite salty. So we'll season it at the very end as we add in our cheese. tasted the actual individual grains of rice that are in there. So we want to cook it to an al dente, which means on the tooth. So we don't want it to end up being homogeneous like porridge. You want to be able to feel each little grain as you eat it to a point, but it should still, I suppose, if you mash it with the back of a spoon, it should mash, but it should hold its shape at all times also. So what I'm trying to do now is just, I suppose, cook off a little bit of the liquid that's in it, because it is still quite liquidy. And I'll show you at the end, I suppose, the texture that it should be. While up to this point, I didn't have to stir it much, but now that I suppose we're running out of liquid, we need to keep it stirred all the time to get that creamy consistency at the end, and to make sure that it doesn't stick to the bottom of your pot. So you've probably seen earlier on that I had truffle oil out. So I have truffle oil there. It's a fantastic way to add just an extra little bit of depth of flavour. The reason I didn't start cooking with it is because I find that truffle is quite a delicate flavour, and you literally just cook it out of it. You're going to be cooking it for so long that you will not be able to taste truffle in the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cook it now until it gets, I suppose, quite dry, because we are going to add cheese, and we're going to add back in our rehydrated mushrooms. So our rehydrated mushrooms are looking quite sad at the minute. They're not very appealing looking, but you'll see, you'll see that they are actually completely rehydrated and back to like a mushroomy consistency. And you'll see I still have some mushroom liquid left over. So if you find that it is still quite hard, each individual grain, add more liquid and keep it cooking slowly for a little bit longer. So I suppose 250 grams of rice, you'd normally use about, I suppose, about a litre worth of liquid. So when I make up, I always make up extra, because especially looking at it than looking for it, and you don't want to add just water to it, because it will actually taste watery in the end. Every bit of liquid you want to add in, you want it to have a flavour of some description in it. So it's getting to a stage now where it will hold its shape to a point, but it still runs. So that's the consistency we want it to end up at. But I'm going to add in cheese and more mushrooms, so I need to cook it a little bit drier. Out there. Parmesan cheese. Now I'm grating it really, really finely. It doesn't have to be this fine, just the small side of your grater is absolutely fine. Now, I wouldn't recommend using red Leicester. It kind of turns grainy. It's not a good taste. White hard cheese is the way to go. So Parmesan, Grana Padano, any of them kind of things. Usually, you even see actually in Carboyle and Louisburg, you can actually buy Parmesan, well, I suppose a Parmesan substitute. But it is a hard cheese. You see it has its rind and it has its full cheesy goodness. So I have quite a lot here. I like it to be really cheesy. So we're going to head back over to the cooker. Get this out of the way. So I was. So you'll see now, I've just turned off the heat. So my risotto has almost set. So that's too thick. It should run. It shouldn't stay where you leave it, if that makes sense. But I'm going to be adding all of my mushrooms in. There's still some liquid in the bottom of the bowl there, so that's going to make it a little bit thinner. So we're going to give it not a beating, but a good firm stir all the way through. And you'll see already it's gone a little bit more, it has more likelihood to run than it did already. And then we are going to add in our cheese. Now I haven't measured this. I have 250 grams of rice, so that is a good fistful of cheese is what I'm adding in. Pop it straight in. We're going to mix it right through. Make sure that there isn't a single bit that there is not some cheese in. And you'll see now it may thicken up, it may get looser. We do still have a little bit of our mushroom stock left over to thin it out if we have to. And I think we do on this occasion. So, I'm going to add literally a tablespoon at a time. That's enough. And give it a mix. That was enough. So the texture that you are looking for is, if you have a spoon, if you put it up on a spoon, it will run, and it'll actually, like, you'll see pieces falling off the sides of it. It won't stick. It will settle itself. Give it a little shake. It should settle itself, and it shouldn't stick to anything. And that's the texture that we should be going for. It's a real comfort food. It's risotto. And the best thing about risotto is you can make risotto 2 days in advance. It'll keep for probably 3 days. So you see, it will hold its shape. But again, if you kind of move it anyway at all, it does kind of settle down and run a little bit as well. So then for finishing, that truffle oil that I was telling you about earlier, a brand new one, a tiny little drizzle of it. That's enough. And then grate an extra little bit of parmesan on top. And that is your finished mushroom risotto.